The Battle of Midway, fought between June 4 and June 7, 1942, was a pivotal engagement in the Pacific theater of World War II. This decisive confrontation marked a turning point, shifting naval dominance from Japan to the United States. The Japanese defeat was a result of a multifaceted set of factors, including overconfidence, flawed planning, intelligence failures, and operational errors. This detailed exploration of the battle will cover every aspect from initial planning to the aftermath, providing a comprehensive understanding of why Japan lost this crucial engagement. Chapter number 1, Overconfidence and Misjudgment. In this chapter, we will delve into the crucial factors of overconfidence and strategic misjudgment that significantly contributed to the Japanese defeat at the Battle of Midway. We will explore how Japan's early successes led to a dangerous sense of superiority and how critical miscalculations in their strategy paved the way for their downfall. By mid-1942, Japan's string of rapid and sweeping victories had created a pervasive and dangerous sense of invincibility within the Japanese military leadership. The conquest of Hong Kong in December 1941, the fall of Malaya and Singapore in early 1942, and the subsequent capture of the Philippines solidified Japan's reputation as a dominant force in the Pacific. Each victory reinforced the belief that Japan's military was unbeatable and that their strategic prowess was unmatched. This mindset, known as victory disease, led to a dangerously inflated perception of Japan's capabilities and a corresponding underestimation of their adversaries. The Japanese military leaders' unwavering confidence in their strategic superiority blinded them to the emerging threats and the potential for counter-strategies by the Allies. The Japanese High Command, buoyed by their recent successes and the effective execution of the attack on Pearl Harbor, was convinced that the U.S. Navy was in disarray and incapable of mounting an effective counteroffensive. The attack on Pearl Harbor, which had resulted in significant losses for the U.S. Navy, was interpreted by Japanese leaders as a decisive blow that had left the American naval forces weakened and demoralized. This perception was so strong that it led to a gross underestimation of the U.S. Navy's ability to recover and regroup. Japanese planners, including Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, were convinced that their next moves would face little resistance, leading them to make several critical strategic errors. The belief that the U.S. Navy was on the brink of collapse led to a critical strategic oversight, as Japanese leaders failed to account for the American capacity for rapid recovery and innovation. Admiral Yamamoto Operation MI was a manifestation of this overconfidence. Yamamoto, a highly respected strategist, devised a plan to lure the U.S. carriers into a trap near Midway Atoll, where he intended to annihilate them in a decisive engagement. The strategy was based on the belief that the element of surprise and the overwhelming strength of the Japanese carrier force would ensure victory. Yamamoto's plan was grounded in several key assumptions: that the U.S. fleet would be caught off guard and unprepared, that Japanese air superiority would be quickly established, and that Midway would be an easy target due to its supposedly insufficient defenses. This plan failed to account for the American ability to anticipate and counter Japanese tactics, as well as the resilience of U.S. forces despite their seemingly disadvantageous position. However, these assumptions were fundamentally flawed. The Japanese underestimated the resilience and strategic capabilities of the U.S. Navy. Despite suffering heavy losses, the American naval forces were rapidly recovering and improving their readiness. The Japanese failed to recognize the speed and effectiveness with which the U.S. Navy was able to rebuild its strength, including the rapid repair and replacement of damaged ships and aircraft. Additionally, Japanese intelligence underestimated the strength and disposition of U.S. forces in the Pacific, leading to a significant strategic miscalculation. The American Navy's ability to leverage technological advancements and innovative tactics further exacerbated the gap between the Japanese assumptions and the reality on the ground. A critical factor in the Japanese misjudgment was their underestimation of American intelligence capabilities. The U.S. had successfully cracked Japanese naval codes, gaining valuable insight into Japanese plans and movements. This intelligence advantage allowed the U.S. to anticipate the Japanese attack and prepare a counter-strategy. The Japanese, unaware of this intelligence breakthrough, were operating under the false assumption that their plans were still secret and that the U.S. Navy would be caught by surprise. The failure to recognize the extent of American intelligence capabilities and the strategic impact of code-breaking significantly contributed to the Japanese miscalculations and their eventual defeat. The overconfidence that led to these misjudgments was a direct result of Japan's recent successes and a prevailing belief in their own military superiority. This hubris blinded Japanese leaders to the reality of the U.S. Navy's capabilities and adaptability. The failure to accurately assess the strength of their opponents and the readiness of their own forces led to a strategic misalignment that proved disastrous. The chapter will conclude by examining how this overconfidence and the resulting misjudgments set the stage for the operational and tactical failures that ultimately determined the outcome of the Battle of Midway. As we move into the next chapter, we will examine the flawed planning and execution of Operation Midway, focusing on how Japan's complex and rigid strategy, combined with incomplete force levels and significant operational errors, contributed to their defeat at Midway. This analysis will highlight the specific tactical and logistical challenges faced by the Japanese and how these issues, compounded by their earlier strategic misjudgments, led to the unraveling of their ambitious plan. Chapter number 2. Flawed planning and execution. In this chapter, we will delve into how flawed planning and execution significantly contributed to Japan's defeat at the Battle of Midway. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's strategy, while sophisticated, was fundamentally flawed due to its complexity and rigidity. Yamamoto's plan relied on a precise orchestration of multiple naval assets, including several carrier strike groups and battleships, aimed at luring and then annihilating the U.S. carrier forces stationed at Midway Atoll. This elaborate scheme demanded flawless coordination and timing, but the plan proved overly complicated and vulnerable to disruption. Unexpected challenges, such as miscommunications between the various Japanese task forces and the harsh weather conditions of the Pacific, significantly undermined the strategy's effectiveness. The rigid nature of Yamamoto's approach meant that once the battle unfolded in ways that diverged from his expectations, the Japanese forces struggled to adapt. This inflexibility in the face of evolving combat conditions led to operational paralysis, where critical decisions could not be made swiftly enough to counteract emerging threats or opportunities. The inability to adjust tactics in response to real-time developments not only exposed the strategic flaws, but also allowed the more adaptable U.S. forces to exploit these weaknesses effectively. Moreover, the reduction in Japan's carrier fleet to just 4 carriers from the 6 initially planned further compounded their operational challenges. The loss of 2 carriers prior to Midway, due to prior engagements and operational losses, stripped Japan of a significant portion of its projected strike capability. This reduction had a profound impact on Japan's ability to sustain air superiority and conduct effective offensive operations. With fewer carriers, Japan's capacity to launch coordinated airstrikes was severely diminished, and the remaining carriers were stretched thin, both in terms of aircraft availability and operational endurance. The weakened carrier force was unable to provide the continuous air support needed for a successful large-scale operation. The reduced strength of the Japanese fleet limited their ability to maintain the pressure on U.S. forces, ultimately leading to a strategic disadvantage. This decrease in carrier strength was not merely a minor setback, but a pivotal factor that critically undermined Japan's strategic objectives and contributed to their ultimate defeat at Midway. As we move forward, the next chapter will examine the intelligence failures that played a crucial role in shaping the battle's outcome. We will explore how the U.S. Navy's success in breaking Japanese naval codes provided them with a critical strategic advantage. This chapter will reveal how the decryption of Japanese communications allowed the U.S. to anticipate Japanese movements and prepare an effective counter-strategy, which was instrumental in turning the tide of the battle. Chapter number 3, Intelligence Failures. In this chapter, we will delve into the critical intelligence failures that were instrumental in the Japanese defeat at the Battle of Midway. One of the most consequential factors was the U.S. Navy's success in breaking Japanese naval codes, which had profound implications for the battle's outcome. By mid-1942, American cryptanalysts, operating under immense pressure, had achieved a significant breakthrough in decrypting the Japanese naval communication codes, particularly those related to the GN-25 code system. This intelligence coup revealed detailed information about Japanese operations, including their plans to launch an attack on Midway Atoll. The U.S. Navy, equipped with this critical intelligence, was able to anticipate the timing, location, and nature of the Japanese assaults. This enabled American forces to prepare and position their assets with precision. Knowing the Japanese plan allowed the U.S. Navy to deploy their carriers and aircraft in a manner that maximized their strategic advantage. American commanders, aware of the impending attack, set a trap for the Japanese fleet, positioning their forces in such a way that they could strike decisively. The advanced knowledge of Japanese movements proved crucial in countering the Japanese offensive and ensuring that the American forces were not caught off guard. This strategic foresight was a pivotal element in the battle's outcome, as it allowed the U.S. Navy to mount an effective defense and launch a counter-offensive that played a significant role in the Japanese defeat. In stark contrast, Japanese intelligence efforts were fraught with significant failures. Despite extensive reconnaissance missions, which included aerial surveys and radio intercepts, Japanese intelligence was hampered by serious inaccuracies and incomplete data about U.S. forces. The Japanese overestimated their ability to gather precise intelligence, leading to critical misjudgments about the location and strength of American carriers and Midway's defensive capabilities. For example, Japanese reconnaissance aircraft tasked with locating U.S. carriers often returned with imprecise or misleading reports, partly due to difficulties in identifying the moving targets amid the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. This resulted in the Japanese underestimating the number and readiness of American carriers. Furthermore, Japanese intelligence was also hindered by the challenge of coordinating information across different military branches, which led to delays and confusion in interpreting the gathered data. The Japanese were unaware of the full extent of American preparations and defensive measures, leading them to believe that Midway would be a relatively easy target. This underestimation, coupled with Japan's overconfidence from their earlier victories, led to a strategic miscalculation that proved disastrous in the face of a well-prepared American defense. In the next chapter, we will examine the operational errors and tactical blunders that further exacerbated the challenges faced by the Japanese forces during the Battle of Midway. We will explore how these mistakes, in conjunction with the intelligence failures discussed here, contributed to the overall defeat of the Japanese Navy and reshaped the course of the Pacific War. Chapter number 4: Operational and Tactical Errors. In this chapter, we will explore the operational and tactical errors that played a critical role in the Japanese defeat at the Battle of Midway. The Japanese faced a series of challenges that undermined their strategic goals, from scouting and search failures to inadequate response strategies. These issues not only hindered their ability to execute their plans effectively, but also created opportunities for the U.S. Navy to capitalize on Japanese mistakes. The effectiveness of Japanese scouting operations was severely compromised by a combination of inadequate search efforts and poor coordination. Japanese reconnaissance missions, crucial for gathering intelligence on U.S. fleet positions, suffered from serious shortcomings. The search efforts were hampered by delays and inaccuracies, primarily due to the large area that needed to be covered and the limitations of the Japanese aircraft involved. These aircraft, often plagued by mechanical issues and limited range, struggled to provide reliable and timely information. Additionally, the coordination between different Japanese fleets and units was subpar, leading to fragmented and often contradictory reports. This lack of cohesive communication meant that critical information about the U.S. forces' actual positions and movements was either delayed or misinterpreted. The Japanese command's assumption that U.S. forces would be either unprepared or insufficiently strong compounded these issues, leading to an overconfidence that blinded them to the true strength of the American defenses. The result was a significant strategic misstep. Japanese forces were caught off guard by the presence and readiness of U.S. carriers, severely impacting their operational plans. During the battle, Admiral Shuichi Nagumo, commanding the Japanese carrier strike force, faced immense pressure and confusion that further exacerbated operational difficulties. Nagumo's decision-making process was hindered by the need to rearm and refuel aircraft, a task that proved time-consuming and complex under the intense conditions of battle. This logistical challenge led to delays and disorganization as the Japanese carriers struggled to launch coordinated attacks. The lack of a clear, rapid response plan meant that when opportunities arose, they were often missed due to the slow pace of rearming and the need to reorganize attacking aircraft. This disarray allowed U.S. forces to exploit the gaps in Japanese defenses, launching successful counterattacks that significantly damaged the Japanese fleet. The inability to adapt quickly and effectively to the evolving battlefield conditions was a critical factor in the Japanese defeat, as it prevented them from capitalizing on their initial successes and led to a breakdown in their overall battle strategy. As we move forward, the next chapter will examine the broader implications of these operational and tactical errors on the outcome of the battle and their impact on the overall strategic situation in the Pacific theater. We will delve into how these mistakes shaped subsequent naval engagements and contributed to the shifting balance of power in the Pacific War. Chapter number 5. Detailed timeline of the battle. In this chapter, we will intricately follow the timeline of the Battle of Midway, detailing how this crucial confrontation, fought from June 4 to June 7, 1942, unfolded and altered the course of naval warfare in World War II. We will explore the events of each day, from the initial Japanese assault to the decisive American counterattacks and the eventual retreat of the Japanese fleet, uncovering the strategic decisions, tactical maneuvers, and critical turning points that defined the battle. The Battle of Midway began on the morning of June 4, 1942, with a full-scale attack by Japanese forces under Admiral Shoichi Nagumo. This assault aimed to decimate Midway Atoll's defenses and prepare for a subsequent invasion. The Japanese launched waves of bombers, torpedo planes, and fighters from their 4 carriers, Akagai, Kaga, Soryu, and Hairyu. Despite the ferocity of their initial strike, which damaged several facilities on Midway, the Japanese were unable to locate and destroy the U.S. carriers, which had been positioned strategically beyond the range of their reconnaissance. In the early afternoon, the U.S. forces, having decrypted Japanese codes and anticipated the assault, mounted their first major counter-attack. Aircraft from the carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown launched a coordinated offensive against the Japanese carriers. U.S. dive bombers, in particular, proved devastatingly effective. They struck Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu with precision, causing massive explosions and fires that rendered these carriers' combat ineffective. The scale of the destruction was immense, with fires raging uncontrollably and crew members struggling to manage the damage. By mid-afternoon, the Japanese carriers were engulfed in flames, their flight decks ruined, and their offensive capabilities severely compromised. On June 5, the Japanese fleet was left reeling from the previous day's catastrophic losses. The morning was marked by frantic damage control efforts as the Japanese sought to salvage what remained of their operational capacity. Despite their attempts to regroup, the remaining Japanese aircraft were significantly depleted and their operational range was limited. The Japanese forces, led by Admiral Nagumo and his staff, faced intense pressure to respond, but their efforts to launch counterattacks were hampered by the severe damage sustained by their carriers. U.S. forces, seizing the opportunity, continued their relentless assault, targeting the last operational Japanese carrier, Hairyu. By the afternoon, U.S. dive bombers once again struck decisively, setting Hairyu ablaze and causing critical damage. The Japanese crew on Hairyu fought desperately to control the fires, but their efforts were ultimately futile. The destruction of Hairyu marked the effective end of Japanese carrier-based air power in the battle, leaving them unable to mount further effective offensives. As June 6 and 7 unfolded, the Japanese fleet's situation continued to worsen. On June 6, the Japanese, still reeling from the loss of their carriers, attempted to salvage their remaining forces and prepare for potential counterattacks. However, the scale of the damage and the ongoing U.S. naval pressure made recovery efforts increasingly difficult. The Japanese fleet faced a critical shortage of operational aircraft and experienced severe logistical challenges. The U.S. Navy, led by Admirals Spruance and Fletcher, maintained a relentless pressure on the weakened Japanese forces. By June 7, the battle effectively concluded with the Japanese fleet in a state of disarray and retreating from the area. The loss of 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hairyu, significantly diminished Japanese naval power and shifted the balance of power in the Pacific. This defeat not only crippled Japanese offensive capabilities, but also marked a pivotal turning point in the Pacific theater of World War II, demonstrating the effectiveness of American naval strategy and intelligence. In the next chapter, we will delve into the strategic and operational ramifications of the Battle of Midway. We will explore how this decisive engagement influenced the broader trajectory of the Pacific War, impacted naval strategies, and reshaped the balance of power between the United States and Japan. By analyzing these consequences, we will gain a deeper understanding of the battle's long-term effects on the course of World War II. Chapter number 6: Aftermath and Consequences. In this chapter, we will examine the profound effects of the Battle of Midway on the balance of power in the Pacific theater and its enduring legacy. We will explore the immediate impact of the loss of key Japanese carriers, the long-term strategic shifts resulting from the battle, and the subsequent changes in Japanese military leadership and strategy. This comprehensive analysis will illustrate how Midway transformed the course of World War II and set the stage for future Allied victories. The immediate impact of the Battle of Midway was both dramatic and devastating for Japan. The loss of the 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hairyu, was not merely a blow to Japan's naval capability, but a severe undermining of its entire strategic posture. These carriers represented the zenith of Japanese naval power, and their destruction critically impaired Japan's ability to project power across the Pacific. The immediate aftermath saw Japan's fleet unable to sustain large-scale offensive operations, and the inability to replace these carriers quickly left Japan at a significant disadvantage. Furthermore, the psychological impact on the Japanese Navy and military high command was profound, as the defeat shattered the illusion of Japanese invincibility and forced a re-evaluation of their strategic priorities. The battle demonstrated the vulnerability of even the most formidable naval forces and underscored the importance of carrier-based air power in modern naval warfare. In the long term, the Battle of Midway fundamentally altered the strategic landscape of the Pacific theater. The battle's outcome marked the end of Japanese expansion and shifted the strategic initiative firmly to the United States. Prior to Midway, Japan had been on a path of rapid territorial acquisition, but the loss of its carrier strength and the inability to execute further offensive operations forced Japan into a defensive stance. This shift allowed the United States to launch a series of counteroffensives and seize critical islands in the Pacific, significantly weakening Japanese control. The U.S. Navy's newfound dominance enabled it to implement an island-hopping strategy that bypassed heavily fortified Japanese positions and cut off their supply lines. The strategic implications of Midway were far-reaching, setting the stage for future Allied successes and marking a turning point in the Pacific War. The aftermath for Japanese leaders was marked by intense scrutiny and a period of strategic introspection. The defeat at Midway led to a significant reassessment of Japanese naval strategies and operational tactics. Admiral Shuichi Nagumo, who had commanded the Japanese carrier force during the battle, faced severe criticism for his handling of the engagement and his failure to adapt to the rapidly changing circumstances. Although there were no immediate, sweeping changes in Japanese leadership, the battle highlighted critical flaws in Japan's operational planning and intelligence gathering capabilities. The Japanese Navy recognized the need for more effective reconnaissance, better coordination among fleet units, and more flexible strategies to respond to evolving threats. This period of reassessment was crucial in reshaping Japanese military doctrine, leading to a more cautious approach in subsequent operations and a focus on addressing the vulnerabilities exposed by the Battle of Midway. In the next chapter, we will delve into the broader strategic and tactical lessons learned from the Battle of Midway. We will explore how these insights influenced subsequent naval engagements and shaped the overall conduct of the Pacific War. By examining the enduring significance of Midway, we will gain a deeper understanding of its impact on military strategy and its role in the ultimate Allied victory in the Pacific. Conclusion: in this chapter, we've dissected the complex interplay of overconfidence, flawed planning, intelligence failures, and operational errors that led to Japan's crushing defeat at the Battle of Midway. This battle was a decisive turning point in World War II, marked by the immediate and devastating loss of 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hairyu, which not only crippled Japan's naval strength, but also shifted the strategic balance in the Pacific. The Japanese overconfidence, rooted in their previous successes, blinded them to the realities of the U.S. Navy's capabilities and the evolving nature of naval warfare. Their elaborate yet inflexible strategy faltered under the weight of operational missteps and inadequate reconnaissance, while the successful breaking of Japanese naval codes by the U.S. provided critical intelligence that allowed American forces to preempt and counter Japanese plans effectively. The aftermath of the battle saw the U.S. Navy seize the strategic initiative, setting the stage for a series of Allied victories that would ultimately reshape the course of the war. The lessons learned from Midway, including the importance of flexibility and strategy, the value of precise intelligence, and the need for effective operational execution, left a lasting impact on naval warfare. As we wrap up today's discussion, we reflect on how the Battle of Midway not only exemplified the U.S. Navy's ability to adapt and prevail, but also highlighted crucial strategic principles that would influence future military engagements. Thank you for joining us. And if you enjoyed this in-depth exploration, be sure to subscribe for more detailed insights into pivotal moments in history.